Good day. Welcome to Stepping Stones. Last time we met, we went over Genesis 38, which is the storyline of Judah and Tamar. Today we're going to cover Genesis 39, and we're going to pick it back up with little old Joseph here. And if you recall, it was Joseph's own brothers that they have sold him into slavery. And Joseph's brothers, they wanted to kill him because God had kept blessing this child. And Joseph's mother, Rachel, she was very special. She was very vivacious and kind of seemed to rub off on Joseph. But the Lord blessed him, and because of that, there was jealousy within the family, and God was using him. And jealousy, as a matter of fact, it abounded in this family. But it's going to be used in this. So we're going to be picking this up again with Joseph in captivity. Book of Genesis 39 verse 1 reads, And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. So recall back in Genesis 37. Joseph was so hated by his brothers that they threw him in a pit or a water well, and later sold him to the Ishmaelites, who were in a caravan heading for Egypt. And upon arriving in Egypt, Joseph was then sold into the house of Potiphar, who was the highest ranking military official of Egypt, reporting right into Pharaoh. Verse 2. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So Joseph was a very intelligent man who kept his heart and mind right with God, and God blessed Joseph in all things, wherever he happened to be. And not only did God bless Joseph, he blessed those around Joseph. They all prospered. Verse 3, And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So certainly this made Joseph likable. Joseph was blessed by God, and that rubbed off with everybody around him. And probably Joseph was a likable person anyway. Verse 4. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hands. So, Potiphar, he put everything in Joseph's hand. It doesn't take long for a person to see that everything Joseph touched is a success. And so Potiphar takes everything he has and puts it in Joseph's care. And so Joseph is pretty much in charge here. Is in charge of Potiphar's whole house and business, sort of like a quartermaster, if you will. And keep in mind that Potiphar is very high in the Egyptian community, right underneath Pharaoh. In verse 5, And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So Joseph is not only taking care of Potiphar's household, he's now handling all of Potiphar's affairs. And because of that, the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and field. And Potiphar was blessed because of God's blessing over Joseph. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person. Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And God had so blessed Potiphar and his household that by now only Joseph knew exactly what Potiphar had and where it was. Um, the expression here, goodly person and well favored, in the Hebrew is an explanation of Joseph's character and appearance. Joseph most likely took after his mother's traits, Rachel, and he had a good personality. And when he brought blessings upon himself, he also sought to bless all those around him. Verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that the master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. So Joseph was pleasant. He was a blessing. He was attractive. And probably Potiphar's wife was smitten by him. And I like to think about this. It seems like everything's going right with Joseph and Potiphar. And doesn't it seem like when things are going well, that's when Satan kind of shows up to attack? But here's Potiphar's wife, and she was very direct and to the point. She's trying to seduce Joseph. Verse 8. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. So Joseph is telling Potiphar's wife, your husband trusts me, even to the point of giving over to me all that he has, including you. Seems like the only thing Joseph didn't have complete control over was her actions. Verse 9. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Instead of just running, Joseph is trying to explain that because of the trust her husband has in him, he could not commit this act of adultery against his master. And this kind of shows us the honesty of Joseph here. Verse 10. And it came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. So here Joseph, he refused Potiphar's wife's advances, but she would not let up, continued day after day to tempt Joseph. And we need to keep in mind that Joseph is the servant. Joseph's the servant of the household, and she is one of the masters. So in a sense, she's not begging him. She's kind of ordering him, and he continues to refuse her. Verse 11. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. So what's going on here is that Joseph is captain of the guard, quartermaster, and he's in control of the goods and services for the guards and prisons. And so Joseph had much business to contend with. And on one of these days, everybody was gone from the household. Joseph was in the house he was tending business matters. And then what happens? Then comes Potter's wife in again. Verse 12. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and he fled and got him out. Now, this leaves Joseph in kind of a bad way. I mean, here's Joseph fleeing from the house naked. I mean, he was in the master's house in the bedroom there, and his master's wife with his garments there. This is looking bad for Joseph. I mean, of course, he is totally innocent. Verse 13. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of the house, and spoke unto them, saying, See, hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us, and he came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. We see here how fast lust can turn into hate, and it certainly has here. And now Potiphar's wife, she's going to get even with Joseph for refusing her advances. Verse 15. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. So here she's painting a pretty bad picture of Joseph, and here Joseph is just as innocent as can be. Verse 16. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. In other words, she hung on to the garment and kept the story right up front there until her husband, Master Potiphar, came home. 17. And she spoke unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me, and it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. So let me ask you, does that sound logical to you that Joseph would keep his garment with Potiphar's wife? I mean, it doesn't sound logical, and I don't believe it sounded logical to Potiphar either. However, to discredit his wife would cause real problems within the household. I mean, if Potiphar believed his wife, under the law, he could have had Joseph killed, but he didn't. No man as bright and wise as Joseph would have left the house with this after this kind of act anyway without his garment. So I'm kind of wondering if Potiphar is believing everything his wife is telling him. Verse 19. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke unto him, saying, After this did thy servant do this to me, that his wrath was kindled. So Potiphar's immediate reaction was to get mad, but I sort of have mixed emotions about this. I wonder who the wrath was kindled against. I mean, I think Potiphar knew his wife pretty well, and by the outcome of this, you can tell that he is not really going to blame Joseph all that much. So Potiphar pretty well knows that he can still trust Joseph, and I say that because of the next verse here, verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Now, who is head of the prison? Who's head of the prison? Potiphar. Potiphar is head of the prison. And guess whose house the prison's next to? It's Potiphar's house. So we see here that Potiphar is keeping Joseph close by there. Okay, verse 21, and listen to this verse very carefully. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Again, who's the keeper of the prison? This is Potiphar. Potiphar. And the very one whose house this all took place in. And it says here, Joseph found favor with Potiphar. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph and all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever that did there, he was the doer of it. In other words, the same Potiphar knows Joseph was blessed. He put Joseph in charge of everything in that prison. And Potiphar has changed Joseph's responsibility from head of his house to head of the prison in a sense here. So therefore, Potiphar is keeping peace in the family here. And at the same time, Potiphar still maintains the blessing that God brings to Joseph. I mean, Potiphar's getting blessed because of Joseph. So, Potiphar's a pretty sharp guy, and I think he's quite fond of Joseph, no doubt, because Joseph is a likable person. And Potiphar, he has the wherewithal to know that wherever Joseph goes, God's with him and blessing him. And you know what? As I think about this, God is with you as long as you talk to him and you let God know that you love him. I mean, we're all going to have problems in this life, but we can cut it. We all are can-do people with God's help, and God will always bless you. And I think this is good documentation as we go through this. That just like Potiphar, like Joseph, God was with Joseph um, and blessed him. Verse 23. And the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. In that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So, in other words, Potiphar learned to trust Joseph in all matters, and Joseph, of course, was being blessed by God, even though his own brothers sold him. But here, God has a plan here. He has a plan here for Joseph. And as we think about this chapter, it would be easy to see why Joseph could be down and out. I mean, you look at what's happened to Joseph. His own brothers sold him into slavery, but he's not down and out. He could have been bitter about that. He could have been bitter about Potiphar's wife and that what went down, but he wasn't. He's in prison, and the Lord's continuing to bless him. But you kind of see the overall plan here that's going to be playing out. There's a famine coming, and God's children, the Israelites, are going to be without food. And so God has allowed this child, Joseph, to be sold into captivity, and he's going to take over Egypt because of the blessings. Yeah, he went through some rough times, but he's going to be blessed. And there's going to be plenty of grain, and his family will come to Egypt, and he will feed them there. And the lesson to this chapter is that proving yourself in little things, um, and as time passes, you'll be given bigger and greater areas of responsibility by God. Potiphar learned to trust Joseph in all matters, and Potiphar knew that whatever the task was he assigned to Joseph, it would be done right the first time and with the proper attention that it was needed. And so it was with Joseph. Potiphar gave him additional and greater areas of responsibility. Sometimes that might be difficult to see or understand. And sometimes that position you're in may cost you a little in the beginning, but God will not allow it to go unrewarded in the long run. God has an overall plan for his people. He has an overall plan for you and me. You know what? And as long as you love him and believe him, that plan will come forth. Don't ever forget that. May the Lord richly bless you as you continue to follow his son. Amen, amen, and amen.